our young people with special needs to have the best outcomes they can in their school setting. From there, the Federation was born as a nonprofit, and then we kind of evolved from there. And a lot of the Massachusetts special education laws, the federal special education laws, the Federation played a big part in that. So the overarching theme is the Federation works to be the family perspective while accessing different systems. We'll go to our next slide. This is a little more inside baseball talk for you of who we are as a Federation. There's a Parent Training Information Center, and that's here at the Federation where we provide technical assistance. We have a call center. We train adults, parents, professionals to be advocates. Also within the Federation is the Link Center. That's where the center I work in. It's all within the umbrella of the Federation, but we are focused on connecting with young adults, linking them as they go through their transition process. So we define transition age youth as 14. That's when youth are invited into their IEP meeting, or mandated to be in their IEP meeting in Massachusetts, and 26. That's how old a youth can stay on their plan for ACA, their parents' health plan. And that's our transition-focused center. A little background information about me. I have worked in direct services for a long while, worked at Perkins School for the Blind, focused on students' transition plans as they leave that school. Worked at Lesley University's Threshold program, which is a program for students who have aged out of their secondary setting but aren't quite ready to access their post-secondary setting. And then from there, I've also worked at the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, working with transition students to have positive first employment outcomes, to have more positive outcomes going forward. And that was out in Oregon. So here we are talking about the workshop goals for today. The big thing we want to talk about is when you turn 18, you're an adult, and there are big changes for individuals when they're now an adult versus a youth. Next steps is the suggestions to help you along the way. So what some of the questions we're going to answer are: what do I need to know? What information am I missing? Who can help? Did I miss a deadline? And we're going to try and help you take a deep breath and hang out for a second and think about what's going on and be thoughtful in your approach. I like to ask when we're doing this in person, are we talking to parents or professionals? So without having the information, I'm going to try and go back and forth by giving perspective for parents and perspective for professionals. Some of our advice talking about connecting to services and supports is different for everyone, depending on your disabilities, your level of need and eligibility, the income that you have as an individual or within your family, what you're able to advocate for as an individual or self-advocate, or as a family member or professional advocating on the behalf of someone, who you know, where you live, what services, resources are in your area. We're very lucky here at the Federation. We're in Charlestown, right on the Orange Line, a quarter mile from Sullivan Square Station. That opens up a lot more services for individuals in this area than someone who is maybe in a different part of the state where they don't have that connection to transportation. So we're going to touch on a lot of these different topics. The big point I want to kind of get out there as we start going is the idea that when you transition out of high school, this is a tough thing for families to understand sometimes, is that you're no longer entitled to services. For families and individuals, you have been fighting for the services you want and deserve for over a decade as you're going through elementary, junior high, and secondary education. There's an entitlement to those services. But once you're out of your secondary setting, it's all based on eligibility. You're no longer entitled to services. So that's just a little thing that I like to remind families about, and professionals. That's kind of a misunderstanding that can get a little difficult for individuals when there's that miscommunication going on where one person's thinking entitlement and the other person's thinking eligibility. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about transitioning out of high school, Chapter 688. You've been looking at the screen for a little while, so we'll just keep moving right along. So when we're transitioning out of high school, we're looking at these two triangles. On the left, you have your secondary setting where every individual in their high school is focusing on education, employment, and working on independent living. And that's all done within the school setting. As you transition out, though, there's this idea of independence, expectations, and relationships. That sort of fills the structure that was your secondary structure. And that's empowering, but it can also be a little intimidating. So we're going to tackle some of those subjects going forward. Individualized plan. We really focus on each individual having a vision for what they want to do, having a post-secondary vision. We have a sometimes we talk about if the vision is a couch, the individual is going to end up on the couch. So I'm going to get a little more in detail though and talk about what I mean by post-secondary vision. Each individual, when they're in school, a lot of times the vision is to get a diploma, to graduate. For some of the young people that we're working with, or if young people you're representing, that vision might not be accurate, but the goal is whether to get a diploma, a GED, pass the high set, age out. That's the goal when you're in school. Once you get into a post-secondary setting, there needs to be a vision to have that day-to-day meaning, to have purposes for things to look forward to continue growth. You're always learning, always having opportunities to be educated. So creating that post-secondary vision. The link we have there talks a little bit more in detail about some ideas on how to create that vision for yourself or for your young one. Transition assessments are a great tool to help you think about appropriate visions going forward. When I say appropriate, I'm talking about goals as well and timelines. I like to mention fact that was shared with me at Perkins School for the Blind is whenever you say a no, you want to have 10 yeses. I say that because when we're working with young people, talking about employment goals or post-secondary visions, we have lots of young people come and state that they want to be a video game designer. That's their vision. But we want to think about what kind of the requirements are to become a video game designer, talking about it's a lot of math, it's a lot of coding. Are those the skills you have? If not, how can we work on developing those skills? And what is it that this young person really likes about video game designing? Is it the aspect of creating the game? Is it that they love playing video games? Maybe it's that they love the network that they're kind of plugged into in the community they become a part of through video games. So it's thinking of this more holistic approach about what the vision is and how to move on. Briefly on transition assessments, I think lots of times people, when they hear the word assessment, they think of SAT, ACT, and those more formal assessments. And those are really valuable assessments. They can help inform and create a picture for this young person and make a plan going forward. I think it's important, though, to remember the informal assessments, the opportunities you have to observe a student, how parents and teachers spend lots of time with this individual, and they can share information that can't always be captured in a formal assessment. So I think that observation and formal assessment supported by data is a really valuable tool in creating post-secondary and IEP goals and kind of formulating a timeline for someone going forward. Transitioning out of high school, it's important to begin mapping out adult community supports, right? So this young person's been in a school system where, once again, they've been entitled to these supports. They've had this network that was natural, built in. You walk into the school every day and there's the guidance counselor, there's the OT specialist, there's your physical therapist perhaps, there's where you're going to get lunch, all these supports that are thought out. You have the bus bringing you there, everything's kind of laid out. We're going to talk about some of the community supports that can help bridge that gap between high school to a post-secondary setting, so a young person still has the supports to be successful, but in a different environment. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a Chapter 688 referral. That picture there is the baton being passed. That's ideally what a Chapter 688 referral looks like. It's the school creating a smooth handoff of services and supports to a lead educational agency. So we'll keep going forward and talk a little bit more about the Chapter 688 referral. It should be happening 2 years before exiting high school. The Massachusetts Turn 22 law addresses transition planning needs of students with significant disabilities who will need adult services. And so the idea behind this is that 2 years before exiting high school, the school is passing on the Chapter 688 referral to the lead agency so they can start planning for this individual. They can ideally be participating in the IEP meetings annually to get an understanding of this individual, the supports they're going to need, and start making a plan for them. A more logistical part of the Chapter 688 is that it gives the state agency time to account for that individual in their budget. They can start making sure the funds are available to provide the services that are needed for that individual. Chapter 688 referral is not a continuation of special education. It's not adult eligibility determination. It's not an entitlement to adult services. It's a mandated form, and it's getting everyone on the same page and helping to make sure that planning is happening at a state level, so there's a smooth transition from high school to the state level. So who is eligible for a Chapter 688 referral? The person must be receiving special education services need continuing services because of severity of disability, unable to work with support for more than 20 hours per week in competitive employment. So these are individuals, you might see them on SSI, SSDI, or registered with the Mass Commission for the Blind. They'll be automatically eligible. A question comes up sometimes as to whether or not my child or the individual I'm working with, the young person I'm working with, should be given a Chapter 688 referral. It's each person's different. Each year, the resources available for different state agencies vary. All that's a really convoluted way of saying is that if you're thinking this person might be eligible for a Chapter 688 referral, then see that process through. Make sure that the school is getting that referral out there. If they're not eligible, that's good to know, but you're not gonna. If you don't put the referral in, you'll never know if they are or are not eligible. I hope that makes sense, but just making sure that the paperwork's getting out there and make sure that things are moving forward. Keep going. So as part of the Chapter 688 process, eligible students will develop an individualized transition plan, and that's a document that specifies the kind of supports that students or families are requesting upon leaving special education 1 year before they leave. So once again, requesting. That doesn't mean you'll be receiving, but it's making sure the agency is aware of what the family and student wants, and you can start working on a plan to see if that's possible. The supports identifying the ITP are not guaranteed or create entitlement. They're subject to prioritization availability. So there's different priority levels based on need, severity of disability, home situation of the individual, and there's also the availability. So that's how many slots are available for a particular resource, how much money is available. So there's a lot of outside forces that can make those requested services maybe not come through all the way. Now, I say that not to discourage people from going through this process. I just want people to be realistic. I think a big reason why I try and be realistic with that is so individuals recognize that this planning needs to start early. There's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of bureaucracy. So the earlier you start, the more positive the outcomes are going to be. So next steps in regards to a Chapter 688 referral. Parents should work with the school to submit the 688 referral, make sure it's happening, signing the referral form to make sure that that information can be passed from the school district to a new agency, and following up, making sure that the process is ongoing. You just want to make sure everything's been received and being processed. My personal experience working with a big state agency is when I was at the state university here in Massachusetts many years ago, it took several attempts for all my final paperwork to be collected, processed, and filed away. Sometimes that just happens in these big state agencies, just making sure that things are going where they're supposed to. And remembering there's no guarantees, so pursuing multiple options for support. Age of majority, age of 18. This is a big subject. When you're 18, you're an adult, and the supports and the built-in entitlement that a parent has for their child, it changes at 18. So we're going to talk a bit more about that as a next steps topic. So the law, at least 1 year prior to the student reaching the age of 18, the student and parent must be informed about the rights that will transfer from the parent to the student. Right, so when the child's growing up, the parent is this main advocate for the student. When they turn 18, a lot of these rights transfer over to the student. So the school district must get consent from the student to continue special education services. One of the things that's exciting about working at the Federation is we have so many staff members who have lived through transition, either themselves or with their children. One of my coworkers tells the story of her younger son sitting in his IEP meeting when he was 18, and he was a bright young man, but he was done with high school and he didn't want to be there anymore. So mom wanted to kind of keep pushing, try and get him in school for an extra year or two, but he wasn't really excited about that. So he was prepared to sign off on his IEP, and that's his right. That's where he can do that. That's age majority. He has the right to do that. My coworker spoke with her son and kind of talked about the different options, and that's when, as a parent, she talked about how, well, you're living here with us and using internet, eating here, so you can sign up on your IEP, but once you make that decision as an adult, you're going to become a rent-paying adult in our home. So it's having those conversations, and that's a little bit of not quite glib, but a little bit of a goofier application of that story. But the idea is that when your young person turns 18, whether you're working with them, whether you're a child, they have a certain level of responsibility, and respecting that and working with them and talking to them as an adult to recognize the responsibilities they have now. There's an advisory from the Department of Education about age of majority, and we're in the process of developing their technical advisory into a slick brochure, which I hope you'll check out our website later to see when that comes up. That's going to be a few months down the road, but you can see some of our other transition brochures that we've developed with DESE. So alternatives to guardianship. There are a variety of different options for you to pursue as a guardian for your young person, or if you're a professional, to work with families to pursue for their young person. They're in different levels of restriction. There's the more restrictive choices where the parent is still making the decisions for the young person, and then there's more shared responsibilities, and then there's the least restrictive, where the young person is their guardian. They have the full say in what's happening. There's different ways this can manifest itself. A great way that I like to see parents pursuing is the financial side of it. It's a scary world, and you don't want your young person to be taken care of. So a shared bank account where a young person gets the opportunities to learn about the responsibilities of paying for their own goods, paying their rent, having a card, being able to take money out or paying with a card. That's a really valuable skill for a young person to become independent. That's the big goal here with transition. And as you're getting older, that independent life becomes a bigger point of emphasis. And I think that's a good opportunity for young people to gain valuable skills, is that shared bank account. So you can, as a parent or professional, you still have a little bit of oversight on where that money's going to make sure there's not a lot of Amazon purchases that are exhausting the funds, but also giving the young person autonomy to make those purchases, to be able to make the decisions that they'll have to make going forward. So our checklist for age of 18, turning 18, the age of majority, decision making, applying for SSI, applying for Mass Health, applying for Section 8 housing, registering to vote, if male, registering for selective service. These are all things that need to be discussed going in there and need to happen. We'll talk a bit more about Section 8 housing later and some Mass Health, but these are kind of those points that you should be hitting before you turn 18, right? Because if you wait till you're 18, some of these tracks will already be rolling. So things to discuss if you're a professional with young people as they're 16, 2 years away from 18. If you're a parent, as your young person's growing up, just having opportunities to talk about these different things and working through these different checklist items. And so next steps, we have a webinar online about guardianship. I think it's a great webinar. It's a really complicated subject. I think it's hard to think about as a parent how this role is going to change for you. You have, in lots of cases, been the big advocate for your child, and now they have a growing voice. And it can be a little scary. I think this webinar, it's from it's a lawyer talking about the process and what the different roles of guardianship can look like. I think it's a great webinar. And some of these other resources are also really great, giving you checklists to make sure you're not missing any steps. A lot changes when you're 18. It's similar to a lot changes when you leave a secondary school setting. Just having, I think, these different checklists can be empowering to know what needs to happen and make sure you're on those right paths. And just to say again, not waiting until you're 18. I think at the latest 16 is a good way to start looking at some of these resources. So you can build up to these skills. If you wait till you're 18, not a lot of young people, myself included, are ready to take on this full role of guardianships for themselves at 18. So finding the opportunities to work on certain goals over the years, I think, is very, very valuable. So entering the adult world, the different adult service agencies that are out there. This webinar is happening right now because of our connection with MRC, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But recognizing that these adult service agencies are different than the school setting that you're leaving, but they can supplement it. They can be that bridge from school into a post-secondary world. ideally you'll recognize this agency that will be providing the disability-related supports for you as an individual, for your young person, and connect with them earlier so you can become a part of the planning process while the student's still in school and working on the skills to better access their resources. Some of the different agencies that are out there, MRC, DDS, DMH, Mass Commission for the Blind, Mass Commission for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Then we have down at the bottom departments of youth services and children and families. So the ones at the top, I think, I'm excited about to talk a little bit more about. MRC, we're looking towards employment goals, but they have broader services they're able to provide, and DDS is doing more of those kind of long-term life skills, which they also have broader services they're able to provide. So for each individual, the best agency is different. The most important thing is to think about them, call out to their to these agencies, find out what their eligibility requirements are, thinking about what services they provide. Does that make sense for this young person you're working with or for your child? And going and visiting them, seeing what they're all about. I think that's the most valuable thing to do when thinking about the adult service agency that's going to be in your child's life. Once again, though, once you kind of identify an agency you want to work with going forward, you can invite them into that IEP meeting, that annual IEP meeting, which I think is very valuable because they're focused on that post-secondary setting. That's where they exist. So it's good to have that post-secondary perspective brought into the IEP meetings in the secondary setting, so you can start having a very broad view on transition and thinking of transition beyond the school setting. Because that's where we all transition to eventually. We're going to be outside of school. You might go to college first, but at some point you're going to be existing outside of the school system. So having these agencies in the room to talk about that experience, I think, is valuable. So how are adult services determined? Once again, it's eligibility, not entitlement. So higher level of support needed. There's an application process. There's based on funding availability of program space, transportation, being able to get there. But most importantly, it's what the individual wants, what their goals are, what that vision we're talking about earlier, that post-secondary vision. If the young person's vision is to work a steady job, MRC, that's an appropriate service for them to reach out to. That's what they want to do, and they can be supported by MRC. So we can keep moving along. So some of our different adult service kind of setups, community-based day services. What does it look like? You're going to work, you're having activities, you're structure and support, there's a staff ratio. An individual will be going into a different organization, maybe going down in Sturbridge. We did a conference at Seven Hills, so that's an example of community-based day services. You all are the professionals here from Work Opportunities. You all can exist as a community-based day service, I believe. But so you're going in and meeting at a brick and mortar site, which that's why I said I believe. I don't think you will have a brick and mortar. But you go and meet at this brick and mortar site, and you go in the community. You have opportunities to work, and you have opportunities for recreation. And then we can keep going to next day hab. It's more structured. There's a higher level of need for the individual who's participating in day hab. There's the OT, PT, nursing services. It can be community-based, but you're not making money. Lots of time Mass Health will be involved, so your insurance is paying for it. But it's an individual who needs a higher level of support to be successful. And then self-directed living. This is an opportunity where a family gets to direct their community-based program for their young person, while leaning on an organization to do some of the administrative stuff, making sure the money's all going where it's supposed to be and being properly allocated. But individuals will have to plan their own days. The difference between this and community-based day service is you're going community-based day service. You're with a group. You're going to be part of that planned activity. Self-directed living, you have the opportunity to plan out the day and make sure that the funds are being funneled towards activities that individual will be most benefiting from. It's what they want to do. All three of these options are great options. It's just based on what the individual needs most to be successful, what they're most interested in. So I guess as a professional, you want to meet the family where they're coming from, where the individual's coming from, though, is more important. So talking to them about their vision and making sure whatever path they are in, whether it's a community-based day service, a day hab program, or self-directed living, that they are having, they have agency in the path they're on. So funding, where does it come from? That's the big question. That's the challenge, and there's different areas and different funding sources. For example, this training we're doing with you all now, we're going to be providing similar trainings to families. I hope there's some families in here, but I have a feeling it's mostly professionals. But if the families are receiving some of these services through the WIOA Family Support Project, that's funded through MRC because they're a transition student. You know, there's different guidelines on how funding is received. Mass Health will cover some programming, won't cover others. Sometimes individuals or their families or their parents will have to fund further services. So it's just, as a provider, making sure you're upfront with families about how they can pay for the services you're offering or what the cost of the services are. And as a family, making sure you're aware that not all these services are free. So reaching out to the organization you're working with to find out what the true cost is, and reaching out to agencies you're working with or your health insurance to see if they're able to cover it. Earlier we talked about being empowered to ask for what you need, being the voice for what you want. That's a good example of that. You know, you never know how much something's going to cost unless you ask. You don't want to get that sticker shock after receiving the service. That's not good for anybody. No one wants to have that outcome as a professional or a family. So next steps. So starting with person-centered planning, right? I mentioned a few times having that student's vision at the center of their plan. You know, that's always important. We really advocate for that here. You want the individual to have opportunities to be self-determined, to self-advocate, to continue evolving and becoming more independent, right? Once again, transition's all about independence. That's what we're working towards ultimately. Independence manifests itself differently for each individual, but everyone should be working towards that goal to have the greatest say in their life as they can. Starting with that, so bringing the whole community in, though, as part of person-centered planning, finding out about the needs that they have, the strengths that they have, where are they going to end up when they're done, when they're older? Are they going to making sure that the services that are being provided for them are can be translated to the community that they live in? Once again, we hit on this point a lot, but eligibility is not guaranteed. You know, it's not entitled to these adult services. So pursuing multiple options for supports, looking to different programs, different agencies, seeing what fits best for you and who's able to serve you at that time. Working on aligning supports with the young adult vision. That's so important. You know, you can be providing the greatest programming in the world, but if the young person's not buying in, you're gonna hit a wall. So trying to find that way so that they can feel like they're supported and that the services they're providing make sense for them. It's what they want to do. Ask questions, be persistent. As a parent, you know, following up with the service to make sure that the programming that's being offered is appropriate for your child, and finding out what's going on day to day so that you are satisfied with what's happening. And as a professional, making sure you're checking in with that young person, asking them questions, being persistent to make sure that they are participating and getting the most out of the programming. As I've been meeting with VR counselors at MRC and pre-op vendors, a big question that I think professionals who are providing services will ask a young person is, what do you want to do today? And the first 10, 20, 30 times you ask that question, you might be getting the teenage answer of, I don't know, or whatever. So just being persistent, you know, building that relationship so that you can get a little more positive feedback. And that sometimes it can be hard as a service provider to keep that positive mentality and keep pushing forward, but recognizing that if you shut down as well, then that student's not going to be getting the most positive outcome. So it's recognizing that you can stay persistent, and you can stay positive, and you can keep building towards that post-secondary vision with this young person. And the last thing we want to talk about, and this is for parents as well as professionals, but thinking about the importance of filling time on evenings and weekends when the program is over. Making sure that the students being able to apply the skills they're working on. You don't want regression or atrophy of those skills that are worked on 9 through 5, making sure that there's things to look forward to throughout the whole week. So a little visual about talking about pursuing multiple options for support. Sometimes your plan A might fall through. You might think it's a great program, you get there, it's not appropriate for you as a young person, or as a service provider, you might be thinking this activity for the day is going to be a great activity, but then you get there and it's not appropriate. So having these multiple plans in your back pocket, if the transition's a fluid state, it's going to be constantly evolving. Things are going to change, so just being prepared for that. No young person, no, not anyone who's 16 and starts thinking about what they want to do for their future, by the time they're 26, they will have gone through so many different plans. So just being aware of that and not trying to do a square hole round peg situation, giving people the opportunity to grow and change. So post-secondary options for education, someone who's on a non-diploma track, why is this important to think about? We're all lifelong learners. We're all having opportunities to develop skills and continue broadening your horizons, gain new perspectives. That's valuable for anybody. I mentioned this earlier, but the idea of if you're sitting on the couch, your perspective's far more narrow than being out in the community. You have a greater option of outcomes if you're out in the community. Some of these options we're talking about that you can pursue as a young person or as a parent or professional supporting a young person as a crafts class, adult education at a continuing ed center, job training, learning different skills to have more positive employment outcomes, certificates of licensure to, once again open more doors for this young person, and going through a community college, seeing different resources available. Maybe this is a young person who doesn't have a diploma, so maybe we're not matriculating, maybe we're not taking classes for credit, but we're having opportunities to audit, opportunities to learn new things that we weren't thinking about before. And also, in my experience with working with young people who are going through their community college experience, you have a new perspective on what it takes to kind of get out in the community and learn new skills. The challenge of getting yourself out of bed, getting dressed, and getting to school every day, that's a very valuable skill, even if you're not gaining credit. Once you're in the classroom, if you're auditing, you're going to learn some more from it. But just getting in the door, that's an accomplishment that deserves to be celebrated. So some of the post-secondary education options, some next steps to look into, MRC, they provide different education options. MACI, the Massachusetts Inclusive Curriculum Education Initiative, I think it's a great program. It's for young people who are in high school but do not have a diploma yet. It's opportunities for them to go to college campus, audit classes, and get that college experience that wouldn't have been open to them otherwise, and also get some job training. And then trade schools, I think that's a really important option for lots of young people to think about. It's great to be thinking about this while you're still in high school, so you can start in a supported environment, work on the trades, and work on the applications to get into these schools. But once you're out of your secondary setting, having the opportunity to continue to learn a valuable skill, I think there's great value to that. Now, these are for young people who are pursuing a diploma option. Having a diploma, that opens up a lot more doors, whether it's a high school diploma or a college diploma. The options for you are a lot broader once you have that diploma in hand. Completing a diploma program at a community college, a 2-year college, 4-year college, it's a greater opportunity for independence, growth as an individual. If it's appropriate for a young person, I think it's a great option to pursue. I'd say each young person should be given the opportunity to audit if they're interested in it. If, as a professional or parent, you're not sure if they're going to be able to meet the demands of college, that's a doubt that lots of people have, and it's fair in lots of cases. But giving a young person an opportunity to go on campus and explore it and meet with the disability services and see if they're able to do it, it's a great opportunity in a college campus to work on that disclosure conversation, which is going to be, for the young people we work with, a conversation that's always going to be happening. So it's a nice opportunity to have a controlled environment to work on that conversation. So next steps is thinking about the differences between high school and college, right? Once again, we'll say it one more time. We'll say it more than once more, to be honest, but the entitlement of services in high school versus the eligibility of college. Some of these links that are listed below talk about going to college, talks about some of the differences between college and high school, some of those skills you need to be successful in college. It's great for a young person to look at, work with their families or professionals if college is a plan they want, to start working on these skills that are universal for everyone, that you need to have in place if you're going to be successful on a college campus. Think College is a great resource talking about the different inclusion programs that are going on across the country in college campuses, and connect you to schools that are really forward thinking about how they're going to include everyone in their college campuses. And our last link talks a bit about this disability services available to students in the college campus. And once again, that's that disclosure conversation. So this is a good opportunity to work on that for young people. I think disclosure is a really hard conversation to have. We have a resource from the National Collaborative for Workforce Innovation. It's written by youth. I think it's really great. It talks about what are the pros and cons of disclosing at different times through the lens of employment, but it can be said for school too. It's hard. It's a really hard conversation. So as a professional and a parent, talking to individuals so they can be aware of what their disability is, what the supports are that they need, the accommodations they need, so they can advocate for themselves is a really valuable opportunity. So post-secondary options for employment. Why is it important? Well, so many young people with disabilities are unemployed. And it's important to have these, start working on these while you're in high school, because the paid employment in high school leads to further paid employment. It's that old adage, it's easier to find a job when you have a job, and so true, especially for the young people we're working with. There's a push now for employment first, the competitive integrated. When I was growing up, there were still workshops was kind of the norm. The segregated workshops, sheltered workshops, and we're really pushing we're pushing beyond that, trying to be more competitive, be more integrated, and that's how Work Opportunities is. I view you all as being a part of that as a pre-ETS service provider, to kind of give people the skills to be confident, to be a competitive and integrated employee. So different options to think about as a professional or as a parent with a young person is volunteering, apprenticeships, job shadowing, having those opportunities to get those skills, to build your resume, to show that this young person is able to work and wants to work and will be able to push themselves up kind of the applicant pool. And then from there, getting part-time, full-time work, being able to work towards a more fully integrated worker. But some more options to look for employment supports. MRC, that's their big goal. They're focused on employment. They're great at it. They have counselors that want to help individuals have successful and long-term employment in their service that can be there for the rest of your life. One-stop career centers. That link can show you where your nearest one is, and you can pop in there and get services on site, and they can provide you with some guidance on where to go and maybe help support you with some different skills that you're going to need right then and there to become more employable. And then some of the adult service agencies that work with individuals, some of these are you have to pay to be supported, but the ones we listed here, these are all agencies that are working with MRC through their WIOA funding, which is a federal grant that's about Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Acts, and 15% of it's supposed to be going towards young people on transition plans. So you all from Work Opportunities are listed there, and then we have a couple of other agencies in the greater Boston area that we listed. But it's growing all the time, these adult service agencies, and now they're getting connected with MRC, which to me seems like a really great opportunity to have state support, federal support for these community organizations. So it's kind of going through that whole spectrum of how individuals can connect with supports. Independent living, we're talking about this, and why is it important? Well, we all want to be independent at one point. That's a goal we have. That's where we want to end up. Having that opportunity to find friendship, joy, fulfillment, having those options to travel, have housing, recreation, being a part of your community. That's all things I see in independent living. I'd say too, going back to employment a little bit, sometimes we focus a little too much on the value of earning a dollar. That financial gain is important. We're not going to blow past that. It's important to earn money if you want to be independent and be successful. But another aspect of employment is getting out of your house, being able to meet individuals, gain that perspective, get more knowledge, continue learning, create friend groups, social groups, build a community, and that all kind of ties into this independent living options. So finding where to find support. Independent living is a really broad topic. So there's lots of different agencies that are providing support towards independent living, but knowing where to find them can be a challenge. Some of these family resource and support centers, a link to locate some of those independent living centers, those are listed there as well. Mass Family Voices, I'll point that out because that's from the Federation. They are focused on providing that independent living and those supports for families and individuals with complex medical needs. I think that's a really valuable tool, especially for families or young people who have a complex medical need. You can feel a little isolated and that people might not understand the complexity of the challenges you're facing. So Mass Family Voices can help connect you with people that can sympathize and empathize with you. They understand where you're coming from a bit more. Family Ties, that's another resource from the Federation. We're in the process of updating it right now, but you can check out that link, and there's a PDF you can download. It's a big book of resources that lists all the different options you have, and based on region and town, so you can find the most appropriate resource for you or your young person. As a professional, this is a valuable tool to help family members think about what it is that they can pursue and look for. As a professional, you might only be focused on one area, and a family's asking questions about another area. So lean on that resource. It can give you a little more guidance. And then Friendships, that's a link to the ARC, creating opportunities to have recreational hangouts and broadening your social circle. So many young people we work with, they talk about the challenge of coming from high school where you have this built-in network of friends you're seeing every day, to going out in the community and not having that built-in support system, not having that built-in network of friends. And it's hard. It's hard for everyone once you're out of school to make friends, especially for our young people with special needs. So it's very challenging. So organizations like the ARC can provide opportunities to meet new friends, meet new opportunities. So some of our next plans, talking about independent living, travel, housing, managing benefits, health and medical care, financial planning. So we address some of this in the idea of guardianship. A young person may not be able to have responsibility, full guardianship over, full control over these different factors. I know I didn't when I was 18. My parents were helping me with housing. They were helping me with my health care still. I was on my parents' plan. I don't think I'm unusual. I think lots of people continue their support, and our young people with special needs are just the same. So we'll get a little more into that now. Travel, why is it important? You have to figure out how you're going to get to work, what's going to work. Safety and ability. For some young people, the opportunity might be they'll be able to get their own license. MRC has a resource where they're able to provide accommodations to help you receive your permit or driver's license. And that might be an option for some young people. Some people might be taking public transportation, whether that's the bus or out here in the Boston area, the T. There's options to MRC once again provides or they contract out a training to help young people get experience practicing to use public transportation, being safe in their travel. That's a big deal. Having that orientation mobility to safely navigate the train station and getting on the right train and going the right way. I think all metro systems are a little confusing, but Boston's can be particularly confusing for you in this area. Trying to figure out if you're going inbound or outbound, that can get a little challenging. And then applying for organizations like the RIDE to have the transportation provided for you. Why is travel important? Well, it increases independence and opportunities. If you are relying on mom or dad to provide your transportation, you are relying on when mom and dad are available. Mom and dad are both working, all of a sudden your options to get out of the house have become severely limited. And for some of the young people that we're working with, they don't live in a community where you can walk out the door and kind of be in the bustle of the town. You're far away, so you have to rely on that ride to get there. The challenge for lots of young people as they're trying to get employment is they go through all the work, they make their resume, they have the skills, they do great in their interview, they're offered the job, but they're not able to get there. So being able to travel independently or having the support to travel opens up that opportunity to be able to work and create a stronger network. So some of the next steps, considering some of these driver programs, I mentioned the first one is for MRC. Well, actually, no, it's through the RMV about the driver's test and specialized options for it, so looking into that. contacting your local transit authority to learn more about the transportation options. So that might be your MBTA, or I'm from out in Western Massachusetts, so it's PVTA. So reaching out to them, seeing what options are there for public transportation, also seeing what the options are for funding. In lots of cases, you can get a discounted or transportation a pass for using the buses or trains. And mass mobility too, just another resource about information and building that network. We'll keep going, talking about housing. This is important to think about. Does the young person want to live at home? Our parents want their young person there. Are they going to always be able to care for their young person? So that's thinking about their peers. What are they doing? How are they going to fit in? And it's a puzzle about making it all fit together for housing. The financial aspect to it, the supports the young person's going to need, the housing that's available in the community they want to be in. This is a conversation that I would try and work around with families. I understand the appeal of bringing your young person home, having them live with you if they've been in a residential setting for a little while. But just recognizing that at some point as a parent, you might not be there to care for your young person anymore. And how are they going to have safe housing? That's a basic right for every person, is to have safe, comfortable housing. And when you're gone as a parent, is that shelter still going to be in place for a young person to be safe and successful? So just kind of working on that and thinking it through. This last bullet point on our last slide, talking about community, is so important, especially thinking of a young person who's receiving services. They're learning these skills and becoming more confident as a young person, becoming more self-determined. You want them to be able to come home and apply those skills. It's really challenging if the community that the young person wants to be in day to day and wants to work in and socialize in and build friendships in and build a community in isn't reflected in their home life. So just keeping that consideration as part of the puzzle pieces. Some of these next steps to consider. We have the Section 8 housing link there. Professionals, especially if you're working with young people them and their families are thinking about where they want to go for their housing going forward, encourage them to apply for Section 8 housing. It's about a 10-year wait list in the area we're at. So even if they're right now at 16, 18, 20 years old, aren't ready to live on their own, when they're 26, 28, 30, they might be ready. So having that option available to them. If they're 28 and they're ready and then they apply, they're looking at a 10-year wait probably to get the opportunity to live independently. That's a long time. So doing that sooner is always great. And thinking about, are they living with family? Are they living alone? Is there going to be a supported living, adult foster care, residential group home? And once again, some of these different options, it's not an entitlement, it's an eligibility. So figuring out if your child is eligible for the services, if there's seats available or spaces available to be in that home. And then going and visiting the home. When I was at Perkins, not lots of our students, but some of our students would go into a group group home kind of situation, a residential setting for post-graduation, for their post-secondary. And going and visiting that setting beforehand was so important. It's scary. You don't know, not knowing where you're going to live. And you don't really know what it's going to be like until you go visit. So having that opportunity, encouraging young people and their families as a professional, maybe finding an opportunity through your activities to go and visit some of these group home settings so individuals can become a little more comfortable with them if that's the path they're on. Gain some more support about housing options. There's some links that we kind of link you towards to get a little more information on the pathways that are out there and where to go and how to access these resources. Managing benefits. Why is it important? Well, work is important. It's important to get out of the house. I mentioned that earlier, the idea is that paychecks are important, but there's that added value, the community value of being an individual out in the community, giving back to your community, being a productive member of society. I think there's a value to that goes beyond your dollar cents. But there's also the fear of losing your benefits. It's a very real fear for individuals and families. I think as professionals, it's important for us to recognize that for some families, they count on the SSI benefits coming in each month. So being aware of how that's important, how that is valuable to an individual. But it's also recognizing that there's many programs that support individuals with disabilities in their employment, and support them to work while still receiving benefits. So we linked to some of the different benefit programs to get a little more information on them, to understand how to apply and the criteria to receive benefits, and kind of where the threshold points are for when those resources are no longer going to be coming through. We also linked to a couple different resources to help you think about working while receiving benefits so that you don't lose your benefits. Project Impact, that's the one I know most about, so I'll touch on that. Is a project from MRC where they have benefits counselors that meet with individuals to talk to them about, work with them through how your funding for SSI decreases based on your employment, and how it, to a certain point, it pays you more to work, receive a paycheck, and still receive your SSI. You know, there's a certain threshold where all of a sudden your SSI is going to be kind of tapped out because you'll be receiving too much money. But the Project Impact is working with individuals so they can be aware of that and can make a informed decision about how much they want to work, how it's going to affect their SSI. And like I said before, families rely on that money, so being aware of that and working with them to get the most out of those opportunities. So talking about health and medical care, why is that important? Well, you know, just like the disclosure question is a big deal, young people need to be able to advocate for their health needs. So knowing their disability, knowing if they need accommodations to be healthy and safe, it's important to take their own medication, right? For young people who are still in school, if they're receiving medications, making sure that's a part of their plan, that they're going to be gaining the confidence to take their own medication in a supervised setting within the school. So many of our young people, when they're in school, the bell rings for the nurse, or the nurse comes by and hands them their medication. And, you know, sometimes young people aren't even aware of what the medication is that they're taking or what the purpose of it is. So having the opportunity while you're still in school to work on it, to know what you're taking and know why you're taking it, being an informed consumer, and knowing who to call or go to for help if a medical emergency comes up, or if their medication has side effects and it's becoming, they're having these negative side effects, so they can know who to reach out to. Or if they mistake their medication, take too much of it, or miss a dosage, and finding out if there's someone they should go to for that. So it's important for a young person to be self-determined, be independent, to be able to kind of start taking control of their health and medical care. Of course, some young people, they're going to need support. That's the reality. They're going to need support going forward with their medication. You know, thinking of an individual who's on a G-tube, they're going to need that support going forward. We're giving them opportunities to find avenues to be an active participant in their healthcare is very valuable. So thinking of some of our next steps, we mentioned family voices before. That's a good thing to connect with Mass Health, you know, the universal healthcare for individuals in the state, reaching out and applying if you haven't already, and making sure the young people you're working with, them or their families, are pursuing that path. The Mass Health Connector, thinking of different health insurance plans you can be connected to, which ones you qualify for. As someone who's used that website before, it can be challenging. So as a professional, that might be an opportunity for you to work with young people and their families to connect with their health insurance in the Department of Public Health. Talking about the different children and youth with special needs and the healthcare programs that are available for them. So we talked a little bit about this before, but the financial planning, why is it important? Well, everything costs money. You know, you want to make sure that you plan ahead for a life without the current supports, and you don't know what you're eligible for, so you need a backup plan. So it's smart to have some money put aside. If it's able to grow on its own in a bank account, that's great too. And you know, there's a bit of an assumption with financial planning. You know, you need to have the money put aside to be able to financial plan. So maybe working with young people as a parent or professional to think about the cost each week of what they're spending if they're going out to eat every week, thinking about what it is they're buying, what the cost is, how much that's adding up each week. I know in my background working with young people, especially now with so many of our young people using cards, which is great. It's letting them be safe with their money. There's a much less greater risk of having that money taken from them by that person kind of lurking around in the neighborhood. But it's a lot harder to keep track of your money when you're just swiping and signing. So finding the opportunity to do budget planning and kind of reviewing transactions for the week and adding it up. So the young person who's spending $40 a week, you do that out over a year and see what that total cost is. $40 a week, what's that? 200 or 2,000? One or the other. I wish I could do 40 times 52 in my head, but we're getting a little later, so I'm losing track of my numbers. But letting the young person recognize that they can see what the cost is and seeing if it clicks. That's, in my experience, that's been a really powerful tool for young people. Some of these next steps, workshop we have listed there is about talking different resources for thinking about financial planning from financial planners. So people who do this for a living, we can talk to you about different trusts, different bank accounts, different opportunities to grow your funds, so a young person can have the money to live independently or support their lifestyle as they get older, especially for young people who aren't going to be able to work regularly. It seems like it's going to be a challenge for them to be competitively and integrated employees, to have the opportunity to start putting money aside to supplement them if they're not going to be able to supplement themselves through work. That's an important thing to plan for. So we're starting to wrap up here, so if you have questions, make sure you send them in to us. But planning ahead is essential for all these. We mentioned some of the not so positive outcomes that lots of young people with special needs face when they leave their secondary setting, but on the other side of it, the earlier the planning begins, the more positive the outcomes are. That's for employment, that's for independent living, that's for education. Just the earlier it starts, the more positive it's going to turn out. So thinking about how can we ensure meaningful day activities, safe housing, getting around safely, who are we going to be hanging out with and talking to each day. So finding opportunities in this 16 to 22 range so that when the student is out of the secondary setting, they've been working on these skills, so they're not being addressed because they have to, but they're being addressed just holistically going forward. Embracing change. We talked about this earlier with the Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. Things are gonna evolve. I mentioned it earlier as well. If you ask a 16-year-old what they want to be, and then you check in with that person at 26, there might be some similarities, but there's going to be a lot of differences, I'm sure. People's perspectives change based on the opportunities they have. So once again, getting out there and experiencing the community. So focus on building the system of support, though, making it a broad system as a professional, finding that young person opportunities to engage with other agencies, not just your own. As a parent, making sure that young person's connecting with people in the community, not just you. Being aware that a parent is always a young person's strongest advocate, or almost always, but a parent isn't always going to be there. So finding those opportunities to build out a support system. Making sure actions reflect a young adult's vision, that they have buy-in, right? If a young person doesn't see this supporting what they want to do going forward, I don't think we should expect them to be fully bought in. So finding that opportunity for that post-secondary vision of a young person to dictate the services they're receiving. Being creative and adaptable, right? Leaning on the community to find employment opportunities. That's my big shtick. My experience is working in employment for young people, but being creative and opportunities to find job shadowing, getting on the community, different avenues to go into. Our executive director, he talks a lot about how his daughter, she wants to be a Hollywood actress. That's her big dream. So they work with her. They don't shut it down. They work with her to find a day job. Most actors and actresses have day jobs going forward, but also find opportunities for her to pursue that goal. And she's a member of the community theater, finding different opportunities to take part and pursue that. When she was in high school, she would participate in school plays. With her, it was kind of a funny situation, though, because she went to school with Captain America, so she had this experience where anyone who wants to be a Hollywood actor becomes a Hollywood actor. But you meet the young person. You don't want to shut them down. You want to give them opportunities to grow. You want to find different roles for them to pursue that goal. And down here, a little folksy saying, "Keep at it. Squeaky wheel gets the grease." So making your voice heard, saying the needs you want. We mentioned again and again that you're not entitled to services when you leave the secondary setting. That doesn't mean you can't ask for services. That doesn't mean you can't be persistent. At a certain point, the eligibility is the eligibility is the eligibility. But as an adult, as a professional, as a parent, as a young adult receiving services, keep advocating for your needs. Keep advocating for what you want, and pushing for the services that you need. With some of the options to stay informed with transition. We have a listserv. I encourage you to apply for it. It's an opportunity to hear what's going on across the state for transition services. So services for young people, 14 to 26. As a professional, might help you connect with different programming, different events that might be great for the services you're providing. As a parent, it gives you different networks to tap into. As a parent, I think it's so important, especially as you're leaving that school system. You're gonna lose that network that you've had for so many years. So start building that new one. I also encourage you to check out our website there, the Link Center. That's specifically our transition section. We link to all different types of resources, and I think it's exhaustive and it's great, and there's a lot of information on our website. We also list there to the Department of Ed, secondary transition. They have a page dedicated to transition to secondary, post-secondary settings. So just checking that out. And we have a slide about our Planning a Life conference for parents and professionals. I think it's really valuable. We just went through our Boston workshop, and we have one coming up in the Berkshires out in Pittsfield. It's a 2-day conference where you get to connect with, once again, just broadening your network, finding about different resources, and getting kind of a crash course on transition, getting a good base of skills going forward. And we are planning on offering another Boston Planning a Life this summer. So just reaching out to me if Berkshires is too far away, but you're interested. Just kind of be on the lookout for that. And then our final slide is talking about how can we help you. We have our call center. It's always available. You can call at any time. If it's staffed, I believe, 30 hours of the week with at least one intern. But if no one's in there at the time you call, you leave a message and someone will get back to you as soon as possible to help share with you the resources we have and point you in a direction. And sometimes just be once again, just a supportful part of that support network for a parent or professional. It's hard. Transition's hard. It's scary. But having these different resources you can lean on is so important. And once again, I'm Joseph Katz from the Federation for Children with Special Needs. We're just wrapping up here. I'll be sending a follow-up email to you with our evaluation for an opportunity for you to give us feedback on this workshop. It's really valuable to us. I ask that you take the time to do it. It helps us kind of set these workshops up going forward and make sure that they are continuing to be impactful and effective to the individuals receiving them. So I ask that you look out for that email, and also follow up with me if you have any questions. We didn't receive any over this workshop. So if something clicks after you close up this workshop, please reach out, and I'll be happy to give you some more information. So once again, thanks for taking some time with us this afternoon to participate in this next steps workshop, and hope you have a great evening. Thank you.